Zion Williamson got a taste of his new role as a franchise face on Friday. The Pelicans lottery prize made his first public appearance as a member of the team and the New Orleans community. Now, time to get to work on building a winner in the Big Easy. Hey there, everybody. Welcome into our Atlanta studio. Now that draft picks have been selected and recorded, time to look ahead to the big picture. This is Next Steps, alternate show title, We Know What You Need to Do This Summer. I'm Matt Weiner. Good to have you with us. Wes Wilcox, the former general manager of the Atlanta Hawks. Seth Davis from The Athletic and CBS. Former NBA Coach of the Year, Sam Mitchell, right there. We'll get into every team and what's on the to-do list between now and the 1920 season, just a few months away. We'll begin with the Pelicans, who've held some of the NBA's most important cards this offseason, including the #1 pick. Friday, Zion Williamson recounted the whirlwind 24 hours that led him to his introductory press conference.
It's been just a lot. You can't even, I'm still taking it in. I dreamt about having my name called by the commissioner since I was a little kid, and for him to call my name first meant even more to me. And having my family and friends that are supporting me, I think just made that moment much better. And as the rest of it, it's just sleep, get on a plane, and press conference.
Well, as team president David Griffin is telling everybody, Zion Williamson is just part of the equation on this roster. They not only took him, but moved down to pick up another first-round pick. They had 3 in all, including Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and that's after the Anthony Davis trade that brought Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball. This has the potential to be an interesting roster and a very different one from last year. How good can this team potentially be this season?
Well, it looks like they're going to try to build a winner. When usually you're drafting a #1 overall selection like this, you're kind of in a rebuild. And on the screen there, we had $18 million in cap room, but they can actually are probably more around 33 right now since they made that trade with Solomon Hill. And when you look at a core of Lonzo, Holiday, Ingram, Zion, $33 million, they want to win, they need shooting in the center. You start to think, man, is this Brook Lopez? Is this Al Horford? Is this Nick Vucevic? The future is set up for this team.
I think it'd be good if through free agency they could get a little bit older, because that's a very young roster that they're putting together. Certainly a lot of upside. I thought they had a great night last night. Obviously Zion was a very obvious choice at #1, but the other 2 guys that they got, I mean, Jackson Hayes is somebody, now he ain't Anthony Davis, I would never say that, but if you're going to lose Anthony Davis, you're getting that type of player who can do a lot of those things, just putting him in that screen and roll game and then being able to rim run, protect the rim on defense. I mean, he does a couple of things really well. He's a kid who, until late in his high school career, was still a junior varsity player, so really came on the scene out of nowhere for Texas to play himself to be the #6 pick. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming out of Buzz Williams' program at Virginia Tech. He's going to know how to defend, know how to play, know how to work, know how to win. I like the culture that Dave Griffin is building in New Orleans.
I love what Griffin's done. I think this team, and Wes, you said it, they're poised to be a playoff team next year. And I'm saying it, a playoff team, because when you look at this roster, when you think about Lonzo Ball, 6'7", he could defend, and people forget, when he went down in Los Angeles, they lost not only a guy that can facilitate, but they lost one of their better defenders. And then you look at Ingram, and you look at Drew Holiday, and then you add Zion Williamson mix. And then think about it. They're one key free agent away from being a playoff team, because the Golden State Warriors are no more, at least for next year, without Durant being injured and Klay Thompson.
The death of the Warriors.
Well, not the death right now, but at least for next year, they'll put them on a little hiatus. But this Pelicans team is poised right now. If they get the right free agent and they can add to that bench. Well, I'm thinking about Al Horford. When you start looking at, they got the young kid in Hayes who can protect the rim, who can be a good pick and roll guy, who can roll and put pressure on the front of that rim and finish. And then you look at a guy like Al who can play the 4 to 5, who can step out and make threes, and a veteran leader who can add some maturity to that roster. I think Al Horford would be a great pickup for the Pelicans right now. And then when you look at what Zion Williams, look, I'm saying it right now, he will average 22+ points a game. He will get to the free throw line at least 10 attempts a game. He's going to do something for the Pelicans that they haven't had before. Anthony Davis, as great as he was, this kid right here is a bona fide winner. Not only can he score, he is an excellent passer. He can facilitate. He can do everything that you need a #1 pick to do. And I think with Griff and Alvin Gentry as the coach, I think they have a chance to surprise people and sneak into the playoffs next year.
It's amazing, though, what changes with the lottery.
Yep.
You know, they make a jump, they go to 1, and everything changes for this franchise. And we're talking about Al Horford joining the New Orleans Hornets, a top free agent, potentially. Pelicans, old school, like the Pelicans. But one interesting connection: Drew Holiday's agent, same agent as Al Horford.
Yep.
So you wonder if that might play a role.
Al Horford's a great addition anywhere. Such a good locker room presence. He makes every defense better. But they've got some potential in New Orleans. The Hawks made a deal with the Pelicans to move up to the 4th pick, which they used on national champion Virginia's two-way star DeAndre Hunter. They also picked up Cam Reddish with the 10th pick. 2 more pieces to add to Trae Young, who finished first-team All-Rookie, Kevin Huerter, who had an excellent rookie year, and their best all-around player, John Collins, who made huge strides his second year. What kind of Mark Sam does Travis Schlenk get for this renovation project as things stand right now?
Let me see, where Travis from? Golden State. What is he like? 3-point shooting. And when you look at this roster, the way he's putting it together, they want to spread you out, they want to attack the rim, and they want to shoot those threes. And when you look at their picks and how they're trying to construct this team, I like what the Hawks are doing because they're trying to build the Golden State Warriors of the East when you look at all these players. And I love this kid. For all the talk about how slight a build he was, Trae Young came in and it seemed like every week he got better and better and better. And I love what the Hawks are doing right now. It's going to be exciting in that arena right now. The Hawks are on the way up.
It's kind of amazing to me that with Trae Young's success as just one example, that people still talk about size being a problem for guards when they're small. If you can play, you can play. And again, in today's NBA with all the pace and space, then it's certainly at the very least not as much of a disadvantage as it used to be. And if it makes you quicker, then maybe it can be a little bit of an advantage. And then their 2 picks last night in Hunter and Cam Reddish, those are 2 potentially elite wing defenders, versatile guys who can switch on to different positions, get you out on the break, play out in space. I'm on record, I'm not the biggest Cam Reddish fan. I think he was a bit of a disappointment in a lot of respects during his freshman season, but certainly the physical potential is there, and I think the way for him moving forward is just to focus on the things you do well, and one thing he can do right now, if he's dedicated to it, is be an elite wing defender in the NBA.
Well, when you're reshaping a roster, and you're rebuilding a franchise, you need hope. And the Atlanta Hawks, they have hope.
Right.
The other thing they need, though, is they need some defense. Last year, they were one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, but they made a really nice addition in DeAndre Hunter, certainly a great defensive piece. It's going to be more than DeAndre, certainly defensively, but it gives them a shot. They're doing the right things. The future's bright.
Fans are patient if they feel like there's a plan in place, and you can see the plan there. If you look, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel here in Atlanta. All right, much more on the way. A day after dealing the franchise's all-time leading scorer, the Grizzlies grabbed his replacement in the draft. How Ja Morant's arrival in Memphis impacts the rebuild.
He's a very high-level shooter, great ball handler, great court vision. What can this guy not do?
Ja Morant, Murray State University, born in Augusta, Georgia.
Ja is showing it all.
When I look in the mirror, I just see a dude who's been through a lot, and faced a lot of adversity, but didn't give up and just continue to work, and everything's paying off for him.
Morant hammers it home. It's a Ja jam.
This kid's enjoying what he is doing.
I fell in love with basketball from being around it with my family. Basketball is everything to me. It's really all I've been around since I was young.
Highly competitive, elite vision and athleticism.
I describe my game as smooth, high IQ, who likes to get his teammates involved first and doesn't force it.
Does anybody have the foot speed to stay in front of Ja Morant?
My greatest strength on the court is being able to see things before they happen.
With an icing on the cake from Ja.
I'm out of my game after Russell Westbrook, just like how he played an all-around game.
Ja Morant has a brilliant career ahead of him.
Making this leap to the NBA means a lot to me. I feel like I do belong here.
Well, the Grizzlies have never been known for their transition game, but transition they must. They traded away Marc Gasol during the season and Mike Conley just before the draft, and with the top 2 scorers in franchise history now out of the picture, the Grizzlies are turning the page with a new coach, Taylor Jenkins, hired from the Milwaukee bench, And the number 2 pick, Ja Morant, the All-American from Murray State, about 3 hours down the road from Memphis. Seth, for 6-7 years, this team was grit and grind, defensive-minded, methodical, and tough. But those players and coaches are all gone. What can this new version of the Grizzlies become?
Well, it's a lot to put on Ja Morant. I love the kid. I think if anybody can handle this, Matt, he can. I love his talent, but let's just keep in mind, when he goes out to Beale Street, he's not old enough to order a drink, okay? So not only are you bringing him in as a number 2 pick in the NBA draft, but you just traded away your franchise point guard. So they're going to do some losing in the short term. He's going to struggle in the short term. He's a very grounded kid. I like the fact that he's coming from a Murray State, so I think he can handle it, but it's a lot for this young man to handle. Physically, everything is there you could possibly want. Mentally, emotionally, his maturity is beyond his years, but this is a very, very heavy weight that he has to carry from day one.
Potentially a really interesting combination, pick and roll, just as teammates with Jaren Jackson Jr.
Well, they're going to work great together because Ja has a great feel for it. It's interesting, the comparisons to Russell Westbrook. You heard that a lot during the course of the season. He's much more of a pure point guard than Russell Westbrook. Maybe not quite the athlete, but not that far behind. So I think getting him and Jackson to work together, I think it's going to be perfect.
A lot of people think Ja Morant could be one of the 10, 15 best passers in the league the moment he takes the floor in the NBA. Well, from Memphis to Manhattan, and for once, Knicks fans were happy with their first-round pick. Go figure. Big cheers for R.J. Barrett Thursday night. As expected, the Duke wing went 3rd overall after scoring nearly 23 a game in his freshman season. He joins a Knicks team that's been adrift during 6 straight seasons without making the playoffs. In fact, at the moment, you might argue the team's most prominent roster addition is cap space, of which they have plenty. Sam, this could go a bunch of different directions this summer. How do you handicap it?
Well, if you're the Knicks right now, it's kind of an influx. You got the guy that you wanted, R.J. Barrett, and then you have last year's first-round pick, Kevin Knox, who struggled at times, but hopefully the light comes on. And you said it, the Knicks are looking at free agency, and right now, with Kevin Durant being injured and Kyrie Irving being rumored to go to Brooklyn, what are they going to do with that $70+ million they have? Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant would fit perfectly in that spot, and then the Knicks' problem would be you would have to fill out your roster with a lot of minimum players. And when you look at the current roster, the way it's structured right now, that's not an attractive sight. And with Kevin Durant now, Matt, being injured, the Knicks right now probably don't know what direction to go in.
The bigger question might be, what do they do if they strike out on the A-listers?
You know what they're going to do? It's going to be a long, long season. R.J. Barrett and Kevin Knox going to average about 25 shots a game because when you look at this roster, yeah, they have Dennis Smith Jr. and they got some other young pieces, but this is going to be a struggle. If the Knicks cannot attract 2 key free agents, this is going to be another long year for Coach Fizdale. But the bright side is them young players will get all the minutes and all the shots, so they'll definitely get a chance to grow and experience the New York crowd.
Don't tell Knicks fans any of that. They've got this whole plan worked out in their heads. The Knicks are banking on bringing in stars. Meanwhile, in Cleveland, the post-LeBron era is lurching forward with an interesting new backcourt. For the 2nd straight year, the Cavs took a point guard with their top pick. Last year, it was Colin Sexton, 8th overall. This time, Darius Garland from Vanderbilt, where he could only play 5 games because of a torn meniscus. Wes, in this day and age, how much do backcourt positions even matter?
Well, they don't matter that much, and we have a great model there in Portland with 2 guards in McCollum and Dame. It's hard to say, right, as that's a comp for Sexton and Garland, but at least we've seen it work. And then when you look at Coach Beilein, the way he played in college, he played a 2-guard front, and those guards were interchangeable, so at least you could say maybe this coach knows exactly how to handle a backcourt like this.
Sure looked like they were thinking offense in terms of the draft. Kevin Love is still part of that roster as well. I don't know what the market will be for him in terms of trades. They've said all along they want to keep him. What's the approach with Love moving forward?
Well, I think with Kevin Love, it's a wait and see because he's one of the only long-term contracts along with Larry Nance that they have on the books. They're not a player in free agency this summer. They're actually currently a tax team at $133 million because they've been taking on money for assets. And we're going to see how they work through this, the expiring contract of J.R. Smith and Brandon Knight and Matthew Dellavedova, John Henson. We're likely to see a couple of those guys be on the move, have it be kind of a pause, a developmental year for the Cavs. But next summer, when they got all that space, those young players, Nance and Love, that's probably when they re-enter free agency.
It'll be really interesting to see how it works with John Beilein moving over from Ann Arbor to be an NBA head coach in Cleveland. Lots more to get to here. Stick with us. On the way, Minnesota on the move, at least up the draft board. What their draft night moves mean to a team that fell back out of the playoffs last season when we come back.
I'm Jared Culver, Texas Tech University. I'm an elite two-way player.
Remember this name, because this young man can get it done.
The hesitation, the spin in the lane.
Why not?
Wow, Culver got the separation. Oh, big shot.
I see myself as determined, motivated, and hardworking. I put in hours and hours to work on my craft and be great at what I do.
Here comes Culver to the rack.
They have a superstar in Jared Culver, one of the best players you've never heard of.
I have a lot to prove. I go out every night trying to prove myself. A lot of people doubted me. A lot of people didn't believe in me, so I stayed true to myself.
Culver up and under, nice move.
When I look in the mirror, I see me working hard every day. I see all the people who doubted me, and I just see myself trying to prove that I can be what I really want to be.
He'll drive, he'll take it in, slithering for two.
And my greatest strength is I'm versatile.
Game recognizes game, and Jared Culver has plenty of that.
I see myself being what people think I'm going to be, but more. People don't have my expectations that I have for myself. I know there's a lot of great players that played in the NBA, and I just want to be one of them.
The Timberwolves tapped a Texas kid with the 6th pick, which they moved up to get in a trade with Phoenix that also sent Dario Saric to the Suns. Jared Culver, pack a coat. He'll be the first rounder for Ryan Saunders, who takes over as the head coach full time now. Seth, does Culver fit in with Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, etc., as the Wolves try to climb back into the playoff picture?
No question. One of the key words he used there, Matt, was versatility. He can play a lot of different positions on offense. He can guard a lot of different positions on defense. I think he could guard 1 through 5 today in the NBA. So at that level, he's truly elite. The big question mark that I have for Culver is, will he add the three-point shot to his game? Based on who he was as a college player his first 2 seasons, I think being picked 6th in the draft is high. Keep in mind, though, this is a kid who is not ranked in the top 150 nationally as a recruit. He has worked himself into be a great college player. The one thing that I think is maybe the easiest to add through time and effort is the outside shot. I think he will work hard and add that three-point shot to his arsenal, and when he does, look out.
His coach, Chris Beard, says he's addicted to hoops, and a lot of Timberwolves fans maybe would like to see that rub off on Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, big time cultural addition. I think Andrew Wiggins, if he could attach himself, handcuff himself to Jared Culver, he'll spend a lot of time in the practice gym, compete with a lot more tenacity and toughness. I think it's going to be really good for that franchise, but he is a bit of a project, and it'll take some time. He's got to add that three-point shot, or he won't last in the NBA.
Not sure the handcuffing is allowed under team rules, but I get your point. Like the Timberwolves, the Bulls turned their interim coach into a full-timer in the offseason. Jim Boylan got the job, and the Bulls chose him a new point guard in North Carolina's Kobe White. Zach LaVine, remember, returned from injury last season, played really well over 60 games. Lauri Markkanen had a couple of different injuries that cost him time, including fatigue and a rapid heart rate episode that kept him out late in the season. Wendell Carter Jr. also played just 44 games all season because of injury. So obviously health is number one concern for Chicago moving forward. When healthy, what do the Bulls have now with this roster? How good can they be?
Well, I don't think they're a playoff team yet, but they're building in the right direction. When you said the key player, one of the players I love on that roster, Zach LaVine, we had him in Minnesota, we drafted him. This kid right there has all-star potential. And then you look at Lauri Markkanen, you look at Wendell Carter, like you said, only played 44 games. So they got some pieces, and I like this pick for the Bulls because they have Chris Dunn there, and they need to wake him up. Either he needs to show that promise that everyone had, or he needs to move on. But right now, this Bulls team is young, they're athletic, they're constantly adding pieces right here. But I still think Kobe White is going to be a difference maker for him. When you look at his size, his ability to get downhill, and you pair him in the backcourt with Zach LaVine, you have Zach LaVine at 6'6", 6'7", Kobe White at 6'5", it makes them a better defensive team with the switching that they do in the NBA, and then his ability to get out and push the ball. Zach LaVine is a runner and a scorer,
sure.
So he's going to love playing with Kobe White.
Does this feel like a core that could be something 2-3 years from now?
It does, but the thing about Chicago, how patient they're going to be. You know, the Bulls have been down for a while, and Zach LaVine right now is continuous to rise. He's an all-star caliber player. You want to see Wendell Carter play a full season to see what he can eventually become, and Lauri Markkanen too, see can that group grow together. But They're in a situation right now where they're still ascending, but those young guys need to start showing some promise, or they need to go in a different direction.
All right, we'll move on to the Washington Wizards next. Washington has all kinds of issues with, obviously, John Wall's injury, John Wall's contract moving forward, and at the moment, Wes, they don't have anybody running basketball operations on a full-time basis. Wizards picked Rui Hachimura with the 9th pick, but he can't address all those other issues. I guess the question is, what is a reasonable expectation for a Wizards summer, and how important is it that they make a decision on who's running the show there?
Well, it's critical to have a leader because nothing works without that. But they have Tommy Shepard there, who is a proven veteran executive that is highly respected around the league. And no doubt, whether it's an interim basis or a long-term basis, Tommy Shepard's going to be able to get them through. And then when you turn to the team, you know, they got $114 million in 10 players. And the toughest spot in the NBA is when you lack financial flexibility, but your team isn't good enough.
Right.
And so that's going to be the key for the Wizards moving forward.
Simple question. Is it time to move on from Bradley Beal? Assuming you can't trade the Wall contract right now, is it time to see what you can get for Beal and regroup?
Well, that's been the rumors that people are circling. You know, when we look at the best players potentially available, it was Anthony Davis. The next one is Bradley Beal. But he's extension eligible this summer.
Right.
And they kind of, you know, dodged a bullet when Bradley Beal didn't make All-NBA, which means he's not eligible for the Supermax. So come July, they're looking at a 3-year, $111 million extension that they'll likely offer to Bradley Beal, and that's where it'll get interesting because Bradley has a decision to make, and if he says no, then what do the Wizards do? And I don't think we'll hear any sort of definitive trade decision until that offer has been made, accepted, or declined.
Yeah, some folks in Washington felt like they should have split up that pair long before John Wall's injury. All right, we've got more coming up here. DeAndre Ayton's Suns were active on draft night, and the reviews are mixed. What the Suns mix could look like by summer's end when we return.
It's been a lowly last 7 seasons for the Phoenix Suns. However, the 2018-2019 campaign may have been the lowest. The Suns missed the playoffs for the 7th consecutive year, and its 19 wins were the fewest since the franchise's inaugural season 50 years ago. Since 2013, the team has had 5 top 5 draft picks and gone through 7 different head coaches. Maybe that's why they've only won 35% of their games during that stretch. 10 second-year general manager James Jones and new head coach Monty Williams finally turned things around. The Suns do have some talent in wing Devin Booker, last year's #1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton, and 4th-year forward Kelly Oubre Jr.
The Suns not only haven't made the playoffs 9 straight years, they've only won as many as 40 games twice in that stretch. Monty Williams becomes the team's 7th head coach since that last postseason appearance, replacing Igor Kokoshkov after a single 19-win season. And Phoenix says they've been active. Eyebrows were raised when the Suns took Cam Johnson with the 11th pick. They swapped with Minnesota to move to 11. And it's not because Cam Johnson's not a good player, but simply because a lot of folks projected him to be available much later in the draft. I know where you are on this, but what's the justification for what many considered a reach there at 11?
Matt, I have to tell you, it is exhausting being the smartest person on Twitter because I was the only person on Twitter last night who liked this pick. He is 6'9", people, and he's the best three-point shooter in the draft. So he might not be the best overall player in the first round. He may not be the toughest guy, the best defender, but he's 6'9", and he is an absolute laser from three-point range. There may have been some health issues with him, and the physicality of the NBA is going to be an adjustment for him. But people talk about these mock drafts that had him late in the first round. I'm reading these things, wondering why he's going so low, given the way today's NBA is going. Last year, the Suns take DeAndre Ayton with the first pick in the NBA draft. He's a very good player, but he is not where the league is right now. Cam Johnson is. This is going to go down as a good pick. And, Matt, I hope you're recording this because I'm the only one saying the Suns did well by picking Cam Johnson.
We generally record the shows.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Booker's there, obviously. They've been looking for a point guard to play alongside him. He's played some point guard himself. They were right there at number 6 where they could have made a point guard pick. What gives?
Well, I don't know what great point guards may have been even available for them at that point, right? Because you had Kobe White, you had Darius Garland, you had John Morant. Those guys are all gone. So this is a best player available type of pick. And again, I think it's a pick that's very intentional with where the league is right now. You got a player, for example, like Jarrett Culver. He does a lot of things really well. I don't know that Jarrett Culver does one thing quite as well as Cam Johnson at 6'9", shoots three-pointers. Give me a guy who does one thing great, the most important thing great, and I think it's a worthwhile pick.
It is the defined NBA skill theory. I get it. It makes perfect sense. All right, in Charlotte, the summer's biggest decision certainly isn't their first-round pick. That, of course, is whether to bring back free agent Kemba Walker and at what number. When it was time to make the call at the 12th pick, the Hornets took Kentucky's P.J. Washington, who led the Cats in scoring and rebounding as a sophomore. This is a franchise that is, frankly, mired in mediocrity. They have missed the playoffs 3 straight years, haven't won a playoff series now in 17 seasons. Sam, what kind of steps can they take this summer to get out of this cycle, and where does Kemba fit in that plan?
First of all, you being nice, mediocre, they've been bad. Well, look, first of all, Kemba Walker has already kind of signaled that he's willing to take less because he understands, and Mitch Kupchak, the general manager, has said, the Charlotte Hornets are not going into the tax to sign Kemba Walker. But if you're Kemba Walker, at some point, you got to ask yourself, you've had a great career thus far in Charlotte, but what does it have? You're not a consistent playoff team. You can't get past the first round. So if I'm Kemba Walker, yeah, I'm looking at the money that Charlotte can potentially offer me, but I'm also going to look around to see what's going to be the best situation. Because when you look at this roster right here, yeah, they got a couple young pieces, but they need a whole lot of help. And just bringing Kemba Walker back, think about it, Matt. You bring Kemba Walker back, and what? You're still going to be a mediocre to a bad basketball team because the albatross hanging around their neck right now is that Nicholas Batum contract. He's not played up to the level of the money. And right now, when you got a guy making that much money that's not producing, it just sinks the whole thing. And if the Charlotte Hornets, to me, they got to make some tough decisions. Even though Kemba wants to stay, they got to ask themselves, do they keep him? Because they need a complete overhaul. They just need to bring in young talent and try to start building this thing from the beginning.
And if they decide no, there will be interest around the league in an all-NBA point guard like Walker. Well, let's stay in the Southeast Division to Miami, a team in a similar spot as the Hornets in some ways. The Heat missed the playoffs in Dwayne Wade's final go-around. And with Hassan Whiteside and Goran Dragic both picking up options for next season worth $27 million and $19 million respectively, they don't have a lot of flexibility or cap room. They do have another shooter on the roster with the acquisition of Kentucky's Tyler Hero with the 13th pick. Wes, what are the options to get better given the way the roster is constructed right now?
Well, first they got to create some financial flexibility. You talked about it. Their current payroll is about $140 million. That's about $8 million into the tax. Your first $5 million cost you $7.5 million in penalty, so it's a lot of money. But it's not just the money, but it's also the flexibility. How do you add to the roster? So when you're looking at, players like maybe Kelly Olynyk, maybe a Dion Waiters, that's why you hear these names in potential trade scenarios. And when we look into free agency, somebody's going to strike out. When someone strikes out, there's a hole. That money, it might be a place where Miami moves some of their players into someone's, empty cap space, and it's a good deal for both. Gets Miami out of the tax, allows them a little more flexibility to add to their team.
Sounds like plan A is wait and hope.
Yeah, well, one thing about the Miami Heat is this is a fantastic franchise.
Yeah.
They spend, they compete, and they develop their players. I never bet against the Miami Heat.
All right. Much more coming up here. Stick around with us. From Eastern Conference favorite to internal combustion, where the Celtics go from here when we return. A season that began with so much promise in Boston just kept blowing up, and eventually it fizzled out in the second round of the playoffs. Now, most expect Kyrie Irving to leave as a free agent. More surprisingly, Al Horford opted out and is apparently looking to cash in elsewhere with a bigger deal. As usual, the C's had multiple picks on draft night. They took Indiana's Romeo Langford 14th, two-time SEC Player of the Year Grant Williams 22nd, and picked up light-em-up scorer Carson Edwards out of Purdue early in the second round. But it is fascinating how quickly a franchise that was tracking toward what seemed like at least a conference title now apparently has to shift gears and regroup. How do they get out of this?
I think they get out of it by going back to what brought them success in the first place, which was bringing in guys who want to win and guys who are committed to building a winning culture. I think they got stars in their eyes with Kyrie Irving. I mean, Kyrie Irving won a championship in Cleveland, hit the biggest shot of the season, playing alongside maybe the best player of all time, and decided he wanted to leave because he wanted to be the man. So whatever you want to say about Kyrie Irving, winning is not the most important thing to him. It was, I believe, to Isaiah Thomas. I believe it's the most important thing to Grant Williams. I love the Grant Williams pick. He's not Al Horford. I don't know if he's ever going to be as good as Al Horford, but he is that type of player, that type of talent, and that type of character. And that was a step in the right direction. And by the way, I think getting Carson Edwards early in the second round is also good for them as another kind of quasi-under-recruited guy who can be an offensive spark plug off the bench. Romeo Langford, the big question for him in Indiana was his outside shooting. Played the whole season. Didn't tell anybody about this with a torn ligament in his thumb, which required surgery to fix, but he didn't want to have the surgery during the season because he wanted to play for Indiana. Indiana kid, huge icon inside the state, made that sacrifice, never complained once about it. I know he's not supposed to be the hardest worker, Sam, but that to me tells me that Romeo Langford wants to win and he's going to give Boston that chance, but they got work to do.
Guys, I love what the Celtics did to be drafting where they are and to get a talent. Romeo Langford's top 5, top 7 talent. And then you look at Grant Williams, 2-time SEC Player of the Year, and he's gotten better every year. And then you look at the Boston Celtics. Weston, you know this. The worst thing to be is in the lottery consistently. Why? Because all those young guys, at some point, they look around the room and they look at the numbers and the money and they say, hey, it's only so much money to go around. And that's when the infighting, that's when that green-eyed monster take over. And that's what happened to the Celtics. And then when you go out and sign a Gordon Hayward, and I know what Danny Ainge was thinking. Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, it can put us over the top. We can be a championship team. Yeah, but when it didn't happen, think about this. All those guys in that locker room went to 2 Eastern Conference Finals Game 7 without Kyrie Irving, without Gordon Hayward. So they're sitting there saying, maybe all we needed was another year, more time. So I think Danny Ainge has got to reboot that roster. He got to reset. He and the coach Brad Stevens got to reset that locker room because the Boston Celtics used to be all about team and winning, and they kind of got distracted from that. They still need to thin out that roster, Wes, a little bit more because you still got that money sitting out there, and you still got some young players that want to get paid. But I think they're on the right track with those 2 kids, the talent, and what Danny Ainge did late in the draft. They had a good night.
Yeah, even with Hayward on the roster, it sure looks like it's going to be Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's team in Boston moving forward and these young additions. To Detroit now, where the Pistons are all in on Blake Griffin, who unfortunately was nearly all out in their first-round playoff loss to Milwaukee. Nonetheless, not a bad first year for Dwayne Casey on the job. Sekou Doumbouya does not turn 19 until December. He was their pick at number 15, first international player to go on the draft. So what's the outlook in Motown for the summer, Sam?
Well, they don't have a lot. You got Blake Griffin. He's been battling injuries. You got Andre Drummond. But I like this pick in Sekou. And I'll let you say the last name.
Doumbouya.
There you go. Booyah. But I like the pick. Where did Dwayne Casey come from? Toronto. Who did they take? Pascal Siakam. And I think when they saw this young man, 18 years old, long, athletic, I think they saw Pascal Siakam like in him. And when you look at him, long, athletic, he can score inside. Look, Pascal had to add to his game, add the outside shooting, but this kid is active, he's long, he can defend, and at 18 years old, the upside there, and when you look at Pascal Siakam, where he's come from, and 2 years ago, I remember sitting there with Leo Routon, looking at Siakam, and I love this kid because you could just see him trending in the right direction. If this kid can be anything like Siakam's going to be, we think he's going to be an all-star in Toronto, this kid has a chance, a good pick, a good start for the new regime in Detroit.
Problem is, based on the intel you read, he is years away from being Pascal Siakam. I don't know if they're going to be that patient playing around Blake Griffin. Like Detroit, Orlando returned to the postseason under a new coach last season. In fact, I don't feel like people really noticed this, but the Magic made a 17-game improvement under Steve Clifford before falling to the champion Raptors in the first round. On draft night, they surprised many by taking Auburn's Chuma Okeke, who tore his ACL in the tourney, won't be available right away. Big picture, though, Wes, how do they keep the momentum forward?
Well, it started with defense, and that's why they were good with Steve Clifford. And having Coach Pearl here last night to talk about Chuma Okeke, he's going to fit in perfectly. But it gets complicated for Orlando when you start managing the cap situation for them. They have 2 key free agents, Terrence Ross and Vucevic. If they don't re-sign both, they have $17 million in room, so they can't replace them.
Right.
There's a ton of money on the market. We got 10 teams with over $25 million in cap room who are going to be going after players like Vucevic and Terrence Ross. So it's going to put pressure on Orlando to re-sign these guys. If they don't re-sign them, it's going to be difficult to replace them. And, you know, Orlando also has a little bit of roster balance that they got to figure out with Bamba, Isaac, Okeke, Vucevic, Mozgov. So it's going to be an interesting summer. It's going to be a juggling act for Orlando. But, you know, with John Hammond and Jeff Weltman, they're in good hands to try to get this thing figured out.
You could argue Vucevic is integral to what they do. They play through him so much offensively. At the same time, you don't want him to impede the progress of those young bigs they have on the roster. The Pacers were also a big surprise for much of last season, but they suffered a major blow when Victor Oladipo went down midseason. Of course, there is some news on that front. Team president Kevin Pritchard told reporters Oladipo may not return to the floor for Indiana until December or even January. The timeline for Oladipo's recovery has been uncertain since he ruptured the quadriceps tendon in his right knee in late January. Indiana went 16-23 in the regular season and playoffs after he was hurt. Remember, the Pacers will be without Tyreke Evans. He was banned by the league for a violation of the substance abuse policy. On draft night, Indy also went big and international with 6'11" Goga Batadze, the MVP of the Adriatic League, and he played for the same team that produced Nikola Jokic and Ivica Zubac. So, Sam, what should summer look like in Indy?
Well, it's going to be tough for them. I like the draft pick because they needed to add some size. But without Victor Oladipo, and you're uncertain about him, you're talking about an all-star caliber player, a two-way player that can get you 22, 23 points a game, that's a lockdown defender. So it's going to be tough. But when I look at their free agents, I like Bogdanovich. They got to try to bring him back. You're talking about a guy who can defend his position, who can play the 2 and 3, who can knock down threes. So to me, he's a key. And then you're looking at Thaddeus Young. Will they have enough money to bring back a guy like him? Again, that hybrid 4, who, again, he's not a great three-point shooter. He's a great guy in the locker room. He can knock down the 3, but he's one of those guys that a coach loves because you don't have to manage him. All you have to do is just coach Thad, put him out there, tell him what to do, and he is a pro's pro. So it's going to be up in the air for Indiana. Nate McMillan has done an unbelievable job, he and Kevin Pritchard, but without your best player in the fold and you don't know when he's going to be back and how healthy he's going to be, everything is in flux right now.
Generally true in the NBA. Teams suffer without their best players on the floor. Not as good. You can take that to the bank. Still ahead. They're still celebrating in Toronto, at least until Kawhi Leonard makes his decision. We'll get into the champs summer next. After 24 years in existence, the Raptors brought an NBA championship to Canada, beating the depleted Warriors in 6 games, validating the gamble that Masai Ujiri made last summer when he made the trade for Kawhi Leonard, fired the coach of the year, Dwayne Casey, and promoted Nick Nurse. And champagne was flowing in Toronto. Is that Canadian champagne? Is that
oh, come on.
U.S. champagne? Is it?
It all tastes the same
imported?
going down, man. Don't matter.
Or poured on top of your head?
I guarantee you
this,
it was cheap champagne, probably, because if I'm spilling it all over the room, it's not going to be no Moet or no Dome.
All this information is relevant and important, by the way, but obviously the most important question is the name you see in the middle of the screen there, Kawhi Leonard, and will he return? And what can the Raptors do in terms of their approach to the summer until they know what his answer is?
Nothing. You ever heard of the saying, the elephant in the room? Well, the claw in the room. Kawhi Leonard's decision. Look, everything rests among what his decision is going to be. And until Kawhi makes a decision, there's not much the Raptors can do. But if Kawhi comes back and talking to Masai, he really believes this team has a chance to be the Golden State Warriors of the East and have a 5 or 6 year run. Think about it. Kyle Lowry comes off the books after next year. That's $31 million. Then you have a guy like Pascal Siakam who you've developed that's going to be ready to move into that side. Fred VanVleet is ready to step into that Kyle spot. And then you look at their bench. You look at all the young players they have. This team is well constructed. Now, they do have to figure out what they're going to do with Marc Gasol. He's probably going to opt in. He has player option to opt in. And then if you can get him and add another year or two to West Point at a very cap-friendly number around $5 to $7 million a year, you can keep this nucleus together. And when you look at the Eastern Conference, other than Milwaukee, who is poised to beat them? Think about it. Other than the Milwaukee Bucks, the Toronto Raptors has the best player, maybe in basketball, best two-way player, and they have the deepest bench when you look at them. So this Raptors team is poised to go on a 3 to 5 year run if the claw will put down those hands in Toronto. And I think there's a good chance. What else can the Raptors do? load management. He only played 60 games during the regular season.
Right.
His health was number one. And two, they won the championship. So they've done everything possibly that they can do. And they're in position to offer Kawhi the most money. So it's all on Kawhi right now.
Oh, they've done their job. Remember, after falling behind 2-0 against the Bucks, they kind of exposed Milwaukee at the end of that series. And now, after a 60-win season that led the league, they're a little exposed financially here and in terms of the cap because of all those free agents you see there. And those are some awfully good and important players to Milwaukee.
Well, this is what happens when you build a great team. Now you got to try to figure out how to keep it. And that really starts with Brook Lopez. Last summer, one of the best signings, signed him for just over $3 million, but he's a non-bird free agent, which means they can only offer him 120% on that $3 million number, or they have to renounce him, create room elsewhere, and then use their cap room to re-sign him. And that's why you saw on draft night, they made that trade with Detroit to move the 30th pick, right? They traded Tony Snell for John Lure, and now they may do something with John Lure to create even more money, maybe even like a wave and stretch scenario that can take them to almost $13 million in room to $19 million in room. So this is financial engineering at its absolute best with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Short answer here. Could they theoretically sign all the important core pieces?
Probably not Mirotic unless they wave and stretch John Lure, and then they have $19 million to split amongst Brook Lopez and Mirotic, but that probably doesn't get it done based upon what we expect the market to be this July.
I'm getting a headache. There's a lot of
this is fun. Come on, let's keep going.
Involved with Milwaukee and the Caps.
I'm just nodding like I know what he's
You
talking
can tell Boy Wonder over there.
Absolutely.
Baby Genius,
Nod,
I mean,
just
Baby
nod.
Genius is loving this.
What these guys do.
This is fun.
Crunch the numbers. All right, to Philadelphia now. And the 76ers, despite a good season, and maybe they beat the Raptors if those bounces don't go Kawhi's way, they're barely a team right now because they don't have very many people under contract. Lots of questions in Philly.
Well, lots of questions, but one thing they don't lack are people who want to score, people who want to shoot, especially if Jimmy Butler comes back. So in that respect, I think it's a smart pick for them to choose Matisse Thybulle. He was the best defender in college basketball last season, a terrific athlete, and I think that he'll move well with Joel Embiid and company. And look, the thing about Thybulle is he played in the 2-3 zone, so there's some question about, is his defense really going to translate to the NBA? Syracuse guys, Mike Hopkins was a former Syracuse assistant. They play that Syracuse 2-3 zone. Those guys kind of get labeled in terms of the NBA. I do think at some point Thybulle is going to have to establish an offensive game if he's going to stick in the NBA. There aren't a lot of people playing for a long time, making a lot of money in the NBA purely as perimeter defenders. So he's going to have to add an offensive game.
Well, they've got a lot of questions to answer there as well in terms of free agents, who's staying, who's going, who will be on the roster next season. We continue. Moving on, we'll get to the five-time Western Conference champs in just a moment. The Warriors coming up in the next segment. Right now, the Brooklyn Nets, who have been building this culture along the way. They've established themselves as the kind of team that players, notably high-profile free agents, may want to join. There's the cap situation right now. They did not have a first-round pick because they traded it away. What's the summer look like for them?
This is similar to Milwaukee, but in a different way. They're just creating more cap room, trying to find that magic number for them is about $70.5 million. That'll fit a 10 years of service, i.e. Kevin Durant, max player, and a 7 to 9 years of service, max player in Kyrie Irving. So what we've seen them do is they've renounced or did not offer Rondé Hollis Jefferson a qualifying offer, so now he's an unrestricted free agent. They have the 17th pick in the draft. They attach with Alan Crabb's $18.5 million contract, move it to Atlanta to create more cap room in that scenario, and then they have another pick later in the draft that they moved on to the Clippers to create even more room. So they're at about $68.5 million of room, about $1.2 million away from having the absolute maximum needed to sign two max players. All they got to do is move Zadon Musa, and they're there.
Just based on buzz around the league, is Kyrie or another A-lister coming to Brooklyn?
Well, it's amazing how much talk there is right now that it is a done deal that Kyrie Irving is going to Brooklyn. But the player we haven't talked about is all-star that they have at the point guard in D'Angelo Russell. So it's interesting because he has a $21 million cap hold. So if for some reason Kyrie goes elsewhere, they can still hold D'Angelo. all the way through the moratorium. And everyone talks about these offer sheets, which is important, right? Some team can put a big number on D'Angelo Russell. But as long as Brooklyn holds his cap hold, that clock doesn't start until July 6th, which gives Brooklyn till July 8th, basically to find out what Kyrie and the other free agents are going to do before they make a decision with D'Angelo Russell.
And
so
match
Brooklyn,
or not match.
Match or not match. And so Brooklyn's in fantastic position. Sean Marks, masterful job of putting himself in this position.
They've done a phenomenal job of building that whole thing in terms of culture, in terms of roster, and of course the cap implications as well. All right, more coming up here. One of those free agent targets out there, Kevin Durant, obviously out for almost certainly all of next season. What does that mean for Golden State, their free agency situation, and their summer when we come back? Well, the Warriors' situation is simple, if not easy to solve, of course. 5 straight Western Conference titles and trips to the finals. Catastrophic season-ending injuries to 2 guys who are max-type free agents. You couldn't have scripted this any worse for Golden State. So what now?
Yeah, it's bad for Golden State. Look, they're going to have to do something, probably max out Durant and Klay Thompson. Both of those guys got injured during their watch. And second, so what do? If I'm Golden State, how much do you play Steph Curry next year? Do you grind him and wear him out? Obviously, he's got to play, but how do you build a team when arguably the first best two-way player, Kevin Durant, is probably going to miss the season, and who knows how long Klay Thompson's going to be out? I think the Golden State Warriors got to do the right thing for those 2 guys, and then they got to try to, if I'm Golden State with Durant and Klay Thompson probably missing the season, I'm going to focus on building my bench and the players around them, so when they do come back, I'm going to have a healthy Steph, hopefully Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Durant. But the reason the Warriors, to me, couldn't beat the Raptors, they had no depth. And that's what happens, Wes, and you know this. When you have a championship team and you have to start paying everybody, what suffers is your depth. And what killed them this year, they didn't have any bench to go to. So if I'm the Warriors, I'm going to focus on building my bench, let these young guys play and develop, and then hopefully Durant and Klay Thompson come back the following year and be ready to start back where they left off.
Well, the bench was a question all season long, and then they got to the finals, and with the injuries, they just didn't have many bodies to go to against the Raptors. Well, this could create an opportunity for somebody else in the Western Conference. Maybe that somebody's the Portland Trailblazers, guys. They reached the Western Conference Finals last year. Nasir Little was their pick on draft night with the 25th overall pick. What's the outlook for tweaking that roster moving forward?
Well, not going to be a whole lot of changes, obviously. I mean, they have one of the great backcourts in the NBA, and Lillard and McCollum. And, Nasir Little was an interesting story on draft night. Here's a guy who came out of high school as a consensus top 5 recruit and had kind of an iffy year at North Carolina, just didn't have a lot of offensive polish. He's very physically talented. I mean, he is an NBA athlete right now. So if he dedicates himself on the defensive end of being a complementary player to those guys, then I think that he'll fit in well. But I think it's going to take him some time to develop his offensive game. I would not expect Nasir Little to be an impact player as a rookie. There's a reason why he slid down as far as he did.
It'll be interesting to see if the Blazers can hang on to some of the depth they acquired during the season, Cantor and Hood and the rest. And, of course, Yusuf Nurkic will come back at some point from that horrific injury in April. The Rockets went from being within a game of reaching the NBA Finals a year ago to the stark reality that they weren't good enough to beat Golden State, even without Kevin Durant on the floor, and now apparently to some sort of chaos in Houston. What the heck is going on there?
Well, expectations, if not met, results in consequences, and that's what this is. It's interesting in this little group. We have the Warriors, we have the Blazers, and we got the Houston Rockets, and none of them have flexibility. And it all comes down to Chris Paul at $38 million and what they're going to do. How do they create flexibility? $76 million when you include Harden just in those 2 players. They got to figure it out so they can create a little flexibility, which is very difficult to do with all that money in those big contracts, because they got to find a way to add some depth to this team.
Is it possible to move Chris Paul with that contract?
You know, it's never impossible, but I would just say it's going to be hard. Now, if a team out there, you know, that strikes out in free agency, needs a point guard, has $25 million in room and maybe a $12 million bad contract or a $13 million bad contract, then you could see something like that where they exchange back into the money, move the money off, maybe get a year off the money. But then the problem with Houston is they still want to be good. They still want to be, a contender.
Right.
And is no Chris Paul absent, or plug in another player, what does that do for you? It's a really tricky spot for the Houston Rockets.
Continuing our inflexibility theme, we go to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are capped out as well. They are very expensive, obviously really good high-end talent as well, but not a lot of room to move. And they drafted a kid who didn't even play last season, Darius Bazley, who came out of high school and basically sat out what would have been his 1 year in college.
So when Darius Bazley surprised everybody, including Jim Boeheim, at the McDonald's All-American game, saying he's going to not play in college, he's going to go to the G League. That was the plan, to go to the G League. And then he signed an agent, and the agent said, you're crazy if you're going to try to play in the G League because you're going to get exposed down there. Those are grown men playing for dinner. So they basically hid him for a year, got him a nice little shoe deal to help him pay the grocery bills. And so for college basketball, the implications are interesting because he ends up being a first-round pick. But again, as far as him having an immediate impact on a team in Oklahoma City who is just kind of I think stuck where they are. Not good enough to get over the top, but not bad enough to rebuild, obviously, an all-world player in Russell Westbrook and no flexibility with the cap. So I don't see Darius Bazley as solving those problems.
You got $1 million for that internship. Those are some high-end groceries you're talking about.
I'm a similar one, right?
Some really good groceries.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Westbrook-Paul George pairing, obviously the talent is there. How effective is it moving forward? Can they build around that still, or are they, as Seth put it, are they stuck?
They don't have a choice. They have to. Look, we're talking about Paul George, who's an MVP candidate. We're talking about Russell Westbrook, who's been an MVP and done some amazing things. They still are a very good basketball team. We're forgetting about Steven Adams. They have a solid guy in the center. But the question is, can they go the hump? But think about it. The Warriors are in flux. We don't know what Golden State's going to be right now. So if you look at this Oklahoma City team, they got to feel pretty good. They got two all-stars, two legit all-stars. So they still have a chance next year to compete and win the West because Paul George, if he picks up where he left off this past season, he has a chance to be MVP. And Westbrook, I think the light bulbs may come on for him because he's starting to understand that having these triple-doubles mean absolutely nothing during the regular season if it don't translate over to winning and advancing in the playoffs.
Got to find some shooters, right? To surround those guys with. Got to find some three-point shooting in Oklahoma City. It's been an issue for years now. More coming up here. LeBron James and the Lakers now have Anthony Davis on their side and a lot of other spots to fill in around. Well, players of Anthony Davis's caliber aren't just hanging around, and it costs something to get them. The Lakers paid a heavy price in terms of their young core to land AD. Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, gone, and gone. They also sent the fourth pick, which landed in the Hawks' hands eventually and became DeAndre Hunter. But the mission this summer for the Lakers is really clear. You've got LeBron James, you've got Anthony Davis. Time to fill in around what could be, they hope, a championship caliber team. How do they get it done? Well,
and add Kyle Kuzma, as those are the three building blocks. And prior to this trade, they got $32.5 million in cap room. After the trade, assuming Anthony Davis takes his full trade kicker, they got $23.6 million in cap room. So the question for the Lakers is how do they maximize this room? And there's a way for them to get more than 23.6, but that requires AD waiving the kicker. That may include expanding the trade, adding players like Bonga, Wagner to a third team, and then treating how you take AD in. So this is a really interesting situation to how they can maximize this room, but then we got to figure out how to spend the room, and which players, and are they going to do that on one guy and build a super team, or are they going to spread that $23 to $30 million out into a couple players and create a little bit of depth?
And there's opinions are all over the place on that, whether you go for the big three, if you don't count Kuzma in that, or if you spread it around and have good quality role players around those guys. Meanwhile, also at Staples Center, the LA Clippers are thought to be a suitor for a lot of those A-list free agents. They did buy into the draft and pick 27th overall for Fiondo Kabengele out of Florida State. But you're talking about a team that could be in the running for Kawhi Leonard if he chooses to lead Toronto, and a lot of other guys. How likely is it in your mind that they land an A-lister?
I think they have an excellent chance. First of all, they got the consummate pro of a coach in Doc Rivers. This guy is a player's coach. He can talk to these guys. He can get the most out of them. And if you look at what Doc did with that roster last year, to get them into the playoffs and to compete with the Golden State Warriors like they did, he did an unbelievable job. But the Clippers right now are sitting back waiting on free agency. They did a lot of things to clear cap room to sign a Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant. So the key is, does Kawhi want to come back to L.A.? If Kawhi comes to L.A. and leaves Toronto, then all bets off. Then the Clippers right now would be the best team, or a chance to be the best team in L.A. But again, it all depends on free agents. Can they get the right guy? Because the thing that Doc Rivers realized, he now has a team of coachable players, and he likes players who will listen, who are coachable. And what he's proven is, you don't necessarily have to be a good team. You can do it without a superstar, but to have a chance to be a great team and compete for a championship, you need at least one, and they're hoping that guy with the big hands, Kawhi Leonard, is coming back home to L.A., baby.
All right, let's get to Denver, and a great season in the Mile High for the Denver Nuggets. Did not have a first-round pick, but frankly, probably don't need one, right? With all the depth they have, all the good young players they have as well. They do have the Paul Millsap situation to deal with in terms of unrestricted free agents, but they've got great young talent, starting with Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, so we had talked earlier in the show about the Boston Celtics, and when they had their run, they did it by getting players who played well together, who wanted to win, who were committed to winning, and a great culture. You talk about Jamal Murray, talk about Gary Harris, you talk about the Joker. Those are guys who fit well together. They were able to get Bol Bol over from the Heat, who fell all the way down to the second round, based purely on talent, and fully healthy. Bol Bol is a top 5 draft pick. Now, whatever was going on with his medical, I don't know if they found a parasite or what they found, but if you're talking about a broken foot, I'm shocked that I clearly didn't expect him to be picked that high. I saw him play quite a bit in high school. He is a very unique talent at 7'2", can shoot threes, put it on the deck. Maybe he pans out, stays healthy, has a great NBA career. I sure hope so.
Maybe so. I don't know. Utah Jazz made a huge deal that maybe isn't getting the attention it deserves, bringing in Mike Conley. This was a match that sort of had to happen, right? It just made so much sense for the Grizzlies to move on from Conley and his contract, and for Utah, with Ricky Rubio a free agent now, to play alongside Donovan Mitchell. This made perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, we thought this would happen last year at the trade deadline. But, last year when LeBron James goes from the Eastern to the Western Conference, there was an arms race in the East. We're looking at the exact same thing happening in the Western Conference right now, and the Jazz are participating. The injuries in Golden State creates an opening, and Mike Conley, the addition of him along with Donovan Mitchell, and the other thing that's really interesting, they got to take Conley into cap space, which means they're a room team. And they have a $16 million contract that's non-guaranteed with Derek Favors that they have an option on until July 5th. So what they get to do is they get to shop the free agent market and say, maybe there's a better complement to us in free agency, that if they find and agree to a contract, then maybe they waive Derek Favors. Derek Favors goes to the free agent market and they backfill with that other $16 million player. Or if they can't find someone that they feel good about, they keep Favors, which obviously has solidified them as one of the best defensive front courts in the NBA. Great job of managing this roster, managing this payroll, building this team. The Jazz have a ton of options to get even better come July.
And again, because of the Warriors situation, this has a team with high-end talent that's got a real shot at making some noise in the Western Conference playoffs. We'll get to Dallas when we come back. Luka Doncic, the prohibitive favorite as Rookie of the Year. Kristaps Porzingis still there. What else could be coming to Big D? The post-Dirk Nowitzki era has begun in Dallas. Kristaps Porzingis, a restricted free agent who has indicated he wants to stay in Dallas. The love connection has been established there. Luka Doncic is the future of this team, obviously, in West. They've got money.
Yeah, they got $29 million, maybe a little more than that, depending upon how you handle their minimum cap holds. This team comes down to Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, $29 million in room, and they've been connected continuously across the NBA to Kemba Walker, and they just happen to need a point guard. This is a team to watch as a rising team in the Western Conference.
Al Horford's name I've heard for them as well.
He's another one we've heard. It's just not quite as easy to see the fit with Porzingis.
With Porzingis, right.
Because they have such a need at the point guard position. But look, if they didn't get, Kemba Walker, they certainly would be willing to bring on a player like Al Horford.
The Sacramento Kings are another team with a whole bunch of money to spend. Harrison Barnes has opted out, so he is available at the moment. But Sam, this is again another team with good young talent there and money to spend moving forward.
Yeah, and it's time for the Sacramento Kings to make a jump. They got the money, they got the young talent. I love De'Aaron Fox at the point guard position. I like Marvin Bagley III. I like the young talent, but at some point, that young talent got to come together and start winning basketball games. And I think the key for them is finding the right veteran free agents. They need some older guys, not old, but they need some guys 26, 27 years old who's been in the league 4 or 5 years, who knows their way around, and who has won. Because, in West, you know this, when you've been losing for so long, and these young guys now, they just been playing for stats and improve their pay status. Right. They need to start understanding there's a difference between just playing NBA basketball and playing winning NBA basketball. And I think right now the Kings are at a point now and I know Vlade Divac, who's won championships, he's ready for a winner. So they're going to look for the right guy to plug in, the right type of veterans to plug in with this young talent to teach these young guys how to win. Because think about it. All these guys came from winning programs in college. But at some point during the NBA, when you've lost 80 to 100 games on a consistent basis, it starts wearing thin on you, and you forget how to win. And they need some guys to come in to remind these young players that they've won before and they can win again at the NBA level.
Worshette, it can become a habit, and they were flirting with a playoff spot for a good chunk of the season, faded down the stretch. The Spurs made the playoffs again. That's not exactly news. Also drafted an international player. That's not exactly news. Luka Samanic, Keldon Johnson, a lot of people feel like might have been a steal at number 29.
Yeah, again, a little bit of a surprise that he went as late as he did. Made a couple of David West comparisons during the draft last night. I think Keldon Johnson is that type of player, just a solid guy who has a lot of offensive potential, and obviously joining a franchise like the Spurs. I think of a player like Bryn Forbes, who came out of Michigan State after transferring over, wasn't really a lights-out offensive player in college. He was a specialist as a three-point shooter. So I think Keldon Johnson hopefully can make that type of offensive improvement because he's bigger than Bryn Forbes and a lot more versatile, and he can guard in multiple positions. I think it's a great fit culturally for that organization.
Well, maybe their most important additions are guys who are already on the roster. DeJounte Murray, and Lonnie Walker are both coming back from injuries and should be ready to go for San Antonio next season. All right, lots more ahead here as we continue to review, and we'll look ahead. Free agent fever coming up Sunday, June 30th, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Remember, free agency officially begins at 6 p.m. Eastern time this year. Be there on Sunday for all the
here. But I'm going to still, like I've been doing, study my teammates and try to find their strengths and learn where they're comfortable at or where they want to have the ball. And with that, I think we'll be great.
Megan
Rice, News Channel 3 Sports. This question is for Ja. Ja, not only are you the number 2 pick in the draft, but also kind of getting the keys to the franchise, you and JJ, or Triple J, I should say. What does that mean, and what kind of pressure does that give you, knowing you're the future of the franchise and it starts now?
I don't think it's no pressure, but obviously I have some big shoes to fill from Mike Conley. He's a great player. I wish him the best. And I just want to thank Memphis Grizzlies as a whole for believing in me and having that trust in me to pick me and put me in the position that I'm in.
Over here.
Ed Marlowe, Paducah's son. Hey, Ja. Congratulations. Welcome to Memphis. My question for you was, obviously, you wanted the opportunity to play over the summer. You iterated last night that may not be a possibility. What will you do this summer as far as your preparation and your expectations and things like that leading into the NBA season?
I think I'm going to be doing what I've been doing most of my life. Just keep working and continue to get better, but not only on the floor but off the floor as well. Just try to be the best Ja I can be.
The Ja can be in the Summer League setting. Salt Lake City as the Grizzlies take on the Jazz Monday, July 1st, 9 Eastern time. Summer League is here. First, one last look at Thursday night's draft in Brooklyn.
What's good? Draft day. Just got the first cut, about to get dressed. I'm excited for it.
There's a few hours from the draft right now. All the work we put in this past season, to see it all pay off, it's going to feel real good. And my suit fits perfectly, I'm excited.
I'm getting ready to go.
On the inside, my favorite part actually, I got my country in there. Got my suspenders. Everything's coming together nice.
You know, you don't realize that the suit is important until you get a little older. They said we should go with the cream white. So my mom hasn't steered me wrong to this point, so I said, all right, let's do it.
Felt like I looked good in pinstripe. I just had to choose the color, and I wanted to be different. The feeling hasn't hit yet. Probably when I get on that bus, probably. Congratulations.
Everybody's dressed, everybody's ready, and we're on our way there now. So definitely starting to hit now. And you're thinking about you actually gonna be in the NBA.
I'm nervous. I'm excited, but nervous at the same time. I got a little butterflies in my stomach.
I mean, alligator skin? I mean, that's tough. Like, you either gonna love it or you gonna know fashion.
Welcome to the NBA Draft 2019 in Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Just about set.
Wait, one more time. As every second goes by, I'm just getting more and more excited, just kind of waiting to finally hear my name called.
With the first pick, the New Orleans Pelicans select Zion Williamson from Duke University.
You know, you dream about these things, and you work hard for the chance it'll happen. And to hear my name called number 1, couldn't ask for much more than that.
With the second pick, the Memphis Grizzlies select Ja Morant from Murray State University.
It's crazy. I'm trying not to tear up and stuff over here, man. It's just so surreal. I can't believe it. It's good. Hey. It's time to go up. Say what's up to the Lord. Hey, it was good.
Y'all know what time it is. Grit and grind, baby.
Yeah. The New York Knicks select R.J. Barrett from Toronto and Duke University.
My son, you did it. You did it. I'm so proud of you. So proud of you. So proud of you. Congratulations. What's up,
Yes, sir.
Boy, let me see my boy. Man, I can't believe this, bro. Like, my heart is still racing. Like, bro, like, you already went on the stage. Calm down. Tonight has been a crazy night. Dream accomplished, but I'm not done yet. Stay tuned.
Great.
I don't even know what to say. I just felt so many emotions at once. I'm so happy and so honored to be here.
Me, number 1, my dream came true. So I'm just ready to work.
Boy, you can only imagine what's going through their minds. Got to be spinning all these interviews, all the attention, all the responsibility. We've been talking about how these teams should approach their summer. How about these rookies? What should their summer look like? What's the best, smartest way to go about it?
Forget about last night. Put it in your memory bank. Every now and then, put it on a video and watch it. But forget about it. I tell all rookies, whatever got you here is got you here. But what you do going forward is what's going to keep you there. It's great. Remember that night. But now the hard works begin, because every year there's a new prom queen. So if you don't establish yourself and prove yourself, guess what? The general managers and the coach, they're going to fall in love with somebody else totally different in that first round if you don't live up to expectations.
I think the same can be said of the teams. I think in today's NBA, building through the draft is very limited. I think most of what we saw last night had to do with teams manipulating their cap, trying to clear cap space, making trades for players that don't have much of an impact but have more of an impact on the numbers. Beyond the first few picks, you're better off using the draft to set up the rest of your summer.
And to that point, we got Brooklyn, New York, the Lakers, the Clippers, 7 max available spots for those teams. Then add in Philly, and you got Kyrie, Clay. We know the list. It's going to be a fascinating summer to see where all these players end up.
How much sleep do guys like you get over the next 2 weeks?
Well, actually, this weekend you get some, and this build up into free agency, it's a little dry, but then it's over.
What is the likelihood anybody other than Zion Williamson is Rookie of the Year this season?
Very slim. He's talented, and he's going into a situation where he's going to be empowered and expected and called upon to carry the team.
Best player in the draft.
Hard to argue. Guys, it's been good. I think we cleared it up. The other teams, they know exactly what to do from here on. Free agency, Summer League, it's all coming. We'll see you for all of it here on NBA TV.